Welcome to my YouTube channel, Truth and Motion Studios. Today I have another international guest who brings a lot of beautiful thoughts and a lot of difficult life experiences, but he really has a lot to say to us, a lot of hope to bring to us, especially for people that were raised in a toxic spiritual setting. Marc-Henri, would you, first of all, thank you so much for being here. Would you introduce yourself a little bit?
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here, and to talk to you from Switzerland, the far away Switzerland in these times of COVID. It's good to remember that the world is still a big world.
Yes,
And
we're all
we are not
connected.
confined to our little two bedrooms and square meters. So you want me to introduce myself? Um, the first thing I could say is that I'm here because I wrote a book, and it looks a bit funny to say it this way, but it's very important for me because it's a book in which I really put a long journey, and this journey began in when I was a child in the family I was raised in, and it was a very conservative evangelical family. And I wasn't totally aware of it. For me, it was looking like normal, Believing in God was normal. Thinking that people would go to hell if they wouldn't believe in Jesus was normal for me. I had no question about it. My question when I was 5 years old, it was, how can I speak about Jesus to my friends in school so that they don't go to hell? Because if they go to hell and I didn't speak, I'm going to be responsible, which was raising some question about the fact that I would maybe go to hell too. But all this kind of confusing environment for a child. And I wasn't realizing how toxic it was. And I grew up in this environment. And, it doesn't come from nowhere. My parents were so attracted to this way of seeing things and of facing life because, and that's something I discovered years and maybe decades later, they were very, very full of anxieties, full of wounds, and it was helping them to stay, to 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 put their life together, to face the difficult things that they were feeling and experiencing. And little by little, I became very interested in God, and I began to join a youth group, and I began to. It was it was my world, and I became a pastor, and I had, the kind of normal way of a very dedicated young kid and then young man in a church that takes it very seriously. And it took me years to begin to realize that me too, I had a lot of unresolved wounds that I was trying to pray away through my Christian beliefs, through my Christian practices. And I had to begin to face the fact that the couple I was engaged in was totally unhappy and totally dysfunctional, and that we were hurting each other very much, even if we were trying very hard to find solutions in our common faith. That was the cement of our couple. And okay, little by little, I began to face these different difficulties. And it was horrible for me, but now I can realize how much part of it was grace, because I had to face the fact that it wasn't working. So I decided to leave my Christian faith and my pastoral work. And I went, I tried to find a new job, tried to begin a new life, and began to ask myself a lot of questions.
Maybe I can interject here. That was a very long introduction, but
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, don't worry about it. You are very passionate about what you wrote in the book. And so the short just introduction for yourself is maybe you are a former pastor and an author.
Yeah.
And something about you that is certainly very unique is you had to have your leg amputated.
Oh, yes.
Yes, and that is a huge part of your story. And I think it speaks to many, many people. Not everybody had necessarily had to go through an amputation, but the aspect of your book that you're starting out right in the beginning is that as a child, you were raised in an environment of such faith that the other side of it was we're denying reality.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And so that when you just said that it just didn't work anymore, that is the part, where you kind of hit rock bottom and you have to say, my faith is not helping my life. It's telling me something about a future that once I'm dead, but nothing tangible for right now. Right now, it's really complicating my life in a very bad way.
Yeah, you're totally right. When I was a child, I had already leg problems, and I went through supposed healing. I was in that kind of meeting where people are watching a healer, evangelical healer, charismatic healer, and he was calling people to give their life to Jesus, and he was calling people to healing. And I went to be healed of my leg problem, which was a huge problem when I was a child, because I had a genetic disease in the leg, and this healer healed me. And everybody applauded, and it was the big success. And my father wanted me to go to this meeting. And when we went to the doctor the day after to show the doctor how God was powerful, the doctor said, okay, I'm so sorry. And he was very sorry and very sad. But everything that I see makes me tell you that you are not healed. Everything is still the same. And it's one of these moments that I had to reconsider. It's one of these moments as a child where I made a decision to suppress my intelligence, to repress my feelings, to annihilate my rebellion, my ability to consider the facts and to act accordingly to the facts. And I did this choice, not totally consciously, but it was a little part that was conscious. It was a choice, to try to preserve this system that was so important for my father, for my mother, for the family, for the balance of life that they had tried to build. And this is one thing that I had to face when decades later, 3 years ago, I had to face my diagnosis of bone leg cancer and the fact that I would have to face amputation. I suddenly had to go back to this memory and to realize, okay, I've carried during all my life this difficulty to face reality in an adequate way. And even after leaving the evangelical church, something of it was remaining, a kind of toxic positivity, a kind of fatalism, a kind of trying to sugarcoat what was happening in order to keep a kind of gentle false security.
Yeah.
How can I say that? Does it make sense if I say that this way?
Yeah, it's we were raised to not claim our negativity. So the negative aspects of life, you're supposed to not say I'm sick. You know that it's the devil is trying to tempt me or something, or is attacking me, rather than saying I have a cold. So I can relate to that.
And you see the negative aspects, but most of it is not even negative. You know, sadness is not negative. Ability to rebel against things that are not fair is not negative. Anger is not negative. Hatred maybe sometimes is negative, but sometimes it's very useful because it helps you to put some boundaries where they are needed or things like that, you know. So this mentality where you need to draw a line. You draw a line between who is saved and who is not, but you draw a line too between what is allowed, what is positive, and what is not allowed and what is negative. And you try to cast away, even to exercise in a way, to cast away the negativity you see in yourself. And it makes humans so small and so disempowered. It's terrible.
Yeah, the system is toxic. I agree with you, absolutely. Yeah, so the theology and the system it's creating, or maybe the system created the toxic theology, who knows what was first, but it certainly makes people very vulnerable to be led that way. And you were a product, becoming a pastor, being part of that system, perpetuating a system that was toxic, not knowing any better, up until you needed to face reality. What was that? Can you remember when you were a pastor that made you decide to, like, this is it, I can't, pretend anymore?
I would say, when you say that, I've got three things coming to my mind. One thing is that when she was around 30 years old, so I was around 32, my sister, my little sister, was diagnosed for the first time schizophrenic.
Schizophrenic. Oof.
Schizophrenic, yes. And it was a big shock for me. And it really made me think. I was still a pastor, you know, and I was just beginning to question myself. I began to think, okay, we tried so hard to pray for her. My father was sure that she was rebellious and even that she needed some kind of deliverance, some kind of exorcism. Our family system was so heavy, and it made me think, okay, I took the role of the one who is reassuring everybody and pleasing my parents, pleasing the others, which fits so well with being a pastor. And my sister took the role of the one saying, okay, there is a problem. You cannot ignore it. And her becoming schizophrenic, it was just right in my face, okay, there is really a problem. And I need to reconsider some important things. This is one thing. The other things, it looks a bit funny, but one day my son, who was probably 6 years old, came back from the Sunday school. Sunday school is the church for children, you know, the place where we put children during the Sunday service so that they become indoctrinated. Yeah. So he came back from the Sunday school crying. And we asked him, why, what happens? And he said, the lady who was leading the Sunday school, who is a nice lady, very gentle, very sweet, loving children and so on. But she explained to him that Pokemon Do you know Pokemon?
Pokemon, yeah.
It's a game, and he was loving this game. He was playing with it a lot. He was loving it. And the lady told him and told to all the children, Pokemon, it's not a game that you have to play because all these little Pokemons are demons in disguise. And it's a way of it's a tool of the devil to trap you. And he was very sad because he was loving this game and he didn't want to stop playing it. And it made me really think, wow, I try to focus my preaching on God's love, on grace, on freedom. But if we tell that to children, it must be very important, because what you tell to the children is supposed to be the core of the message, because you need to make it as simple as possible so that they can take it. So what we say to children is not about grace, it's not about love, it's not about freedom. It's about be afraid. Be afraid of the world around you. Be afraid of what comes from other places than church. Be afraid of imagination. Be afraid and be guilty. And I think my son didn't ever go to the Sunday school since this day.
Wow.
Because we decided, okay, you are allowed not to go there. And it was an important step in my decision to leave. It looks very simple, and I could have seen it years before. But the fact that it was involving my own son, it made me open my eyes in a way. And the third thing, of course, was how unhappy we were in our marriage with my ex-wife, because we divorced years later, and how much the only thing that was putting us together was our faith. And from the beginning, because we wouldn't have married together if it wouldn't have been the fact that she was probably the only girl available in the church I was in, and the fact that she was seeing in me kind of ideal of a pastor instead of who I was. Everything was built on so twisted foundations that it happened to be impossible to build something together when we began to face this kind of evidences. And the fact that we invested so much time and prayer and even sometimes love and sincerity, trying to repair and seeing that it wasn't working. So these three things together made me go to see a therapist, and her too. And it was the beginning of this process of little by little, we were beginning to find another way to see reality, which is really what it's about. Because when you are raised into a religious environment that is toxic, your way of seeing reality is totally twisted. Your connection with reality is twisted. Your connection with yourself is twisted. And your connection with spirituality is twisted.
Yeah. And you mentioned your son, which reminds me that in your book, you are working kind of on the premise that we all have a little child inside of us, the child from that we remember the things that happened to us, maybe not everything in every detail, but certainly some traumatic things.
Yeah.
And that person, that little afraid, confused person remains inside of us. And our healing is really to that child inside of us. So what you just mentioned about how we're twisted in our sense of reality, with the little child in mind, what thoughts come to mind for you?
Wow. You know, this idea of the little child inside of us, it's, of course, it's metaphorical,
Mm-hmm.
but it's metaphorical, but it's very real in the same way, in the same time. Uh, a lot of my process of healing and of facing the toxicity was to begin with the adult I am now, with everything that I could understand, and of course, even with the help of the divine that I was able to connect with in a new way, was to go to meet these parts of me that had been traumatized, had been hurt, had been repressed, and in different ways. And the doorway to meet these parts of me, it was really memories. You know, when I begin to do this work of unpacking the toxicity, the doorways were going back to the memories that were coming back to me. And it was not repressed memories, it was memories that were very present and alive, but beginning to see in these memories what I wasn't aware of until now, which was this toxicity, which was the wound of the child, which was the sadness, the repression, the anger, the different, very strong emotions that couldn't come to consciousness in this past.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and from a psychological aspect, we really cannot come to full maturity if we cannot allow to become aware of all the feelings that are inside of us. So you weren't allowed to be angry. This wasn't a thing. God would not have you be angry. If he didn't heal you, it was your fault. So you can't be angry. You have to suppress that. And so
Exactly.
you're never learning to regulate your feelings either, which is also part of maturity. So suppression and no regulation, that usually leads to people acting out in other ways.
You know, in a way, I think this anger, you take this example of the moment where I was not healed and had to repress anger, sadness, even terror, you know, because it's terrifying to realize that the adult in charge are totally crazy.
Yeah.
It's terrifying for 11 years old. So these feelings, these emotions, I think at this point of time, they become frozen, and they are not past emotions. They are very present emotions, but frozen into the body. And you have to find them in your body in a way. You have to find, you know, I cannot find words to express it, but I can feel some body sensations when I think of some memories. And these body sensations, they are the little thread you begin to pull in order to find back the emotions and the other emotions that are hidden behind, and you know, to unpack little by little this whole frozen thing that needs to come to life again, and to discover. It was so freeing for me to realize, okay, this child he was totally right in his way of seeing things. It was empowering. It was a sweet reconciliation, you know. It was this child I was is still here, is part of me, and he has a lot of intelligence, sensitivity, life energy, and he needs the adult I am now. Everything that I learned, my maturity, the life challenges that I have been through, and both together, it's a beautiful team.
Yeah, integration. Yes, that seems
Integration, yes, totally.
Yeah, the word that I hear from many people that I consider in a really healthy place, integration, that we don't deny, we don't suppress, but we face and we allow it to change
We
us.
embrace.
Yeah.
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 And
I definitely, we have to look at the clock a little bit. I definitely want to hear on the faith and how you describe it right now. But before we end on what I think is a very beautiful note, I'd like to hear more that your book is called Toxic Jesus.
yes.
Yeah, so that is a little bit in your face, and you remember your own 30-year-old pastor self before you started to really go after those nagging thoughts, these things that didn't add up. If someone had given you a book and said, "Hey, someone wrote this, it's called Toxic Jesus," what would you have said? What would you have thought?
I would have prayed for this guy a lot. And probably I would have looked at him with my gentle, pastoral, compassionate eyes and nice smile. And probably we wouldn't have any kind of deep conversation would have been impossible.
Yes.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah, I can absolutely identify with what you just said. And I think 10 years ago, your book would have also, I wouldn't have made it past the title. I would have judged it. And it took me a few years to get to a place where I could read things that had opinions that were different, but I was in the same place that you described, and that is what I was doing, what I was believing wasn't working well for me anymore, and I needed to realize, face that, and expose myself to different thoughts, and that was very healing for me also, or it put me on a path.
It makes me think of something,
Yeah.
I'm aware that this book is full of some kind of anger. And I wrote it first because I owed it to myself, of course. But I really was thinking of the people I heard when I was a pastor. Because I was a perpetrator of the same kind of abuse that I had received.
Yeah.
Even if I was trying very hard to be a good pastor, talking about love, talking about freedom and life, but I really am aware of this fact. And I want, in making this book a bit provocative, I didn't choose it in a way that this title came to me, and this I could say, this revelation of the toxic Jesuses came to me really in a spiritual experience that was very deep. And it was an experience with Jesus and with the non-toxic Jesus, with the healthy Jesus, But I had to face the fact that it's hard stuff. And what we did with the figure of Jesus in evangelical churches today, it's terrible. It's a blasphemy, it's an idol, and it needs to be addressed in a very strong way. And I hope this book gives to some people the freedom and the
Language?
kind of an open door to begin to validate what they have been through, to validate and to help them in this path of finding a true and a healthy spirituality and confronting the toxic one.
Yeah. Yes, and while I probably wouldn't have worded it the way you have, I definitely, with all the conclusions you came to, I'm in 100% agreement. So that's fascinating. See that you're in Switzerland and you had your experience in Oregon, though, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I mean, that's not that far away, I guess. But we're on all these different paths, and the revelation of truly good news somehow makes its way to all sorts of different people.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why don't we look at it just a little bit? So the first part is the toxic Jesuses, holy shit, and spiritual abuse. There's a lot of. So you said there's anger, and I know what you mean with that, but I want the audience to know that don't expect a book that is full of this is all so terrible. That's not it. You have righteous anger at this these toxic Jesus imposters, if you will, are so detrimental to the soul of people, and they turn people into really unhealthy, toxic human beings that needs to be addressed. And so at least we can't take that away from people if that's what they want to believe. That's it. But at least we can speak the truth that we have discovered and say, do with it what you want to. And so you have the different Jesuses that you're focusing on: Jesus the negator, Jesus the punisher, Jesus the magician, Jesus the oppressor, Jesus the Puritan, and Jesus the fanatic. So they are all, this is such a smart way to write an autobiography. I was so impressed, and it's very interesting. So this book is certainly, it's theology, it's self-help, but it's certainly also an autobiography. Take me more into how you came to this.
This whole is born from a healing experience, and a very deep healing experience. And I think it's the reason why this book, I think, has a healing power. That's what people told me when they read it.
Yeah.
I can tell you a bit about it, This experience began when I heard the doctor tell me that I had bone cancer. And I was terrified. And I went back home with my wife, and we were both terrified and both totally confused. And I went to bed, and I wasn't able to sleep, of course. And I did what I teach to people during years. I began to meditate. I'm a meditation teacher, and I teach people to listen to their breath and to stay with the present moment. And I tried to do that, not hoping very much, but just in order to find maybe some quietness and some ability to calm my deep anxiety and even terror. And it was difficult to meditate. So I did something I would never do. I used the mantra. And what came to my mind as a mantra was the name of Jesus. Probably because Jesus was still associated for me with a loving, supporting, caring person. And I remember moments where I had decided to leave my evangelical church and so on, where I had this feeling that Jesus was with me and was wanting me to grow and to a lot of supporting image with this name Jesus. So I began to say Jesus inhalation, Jesus exhalation, and concentrating just my mind to this only word in order to try to calm down all the thinking mind that was totally havoc. And in a question of 1 or 2 minutes, I was full of peace. And it was a total surprise for me. I was amazed of it. And it was not a peace that was suppressing what was happening to me. It was, like being in the eye of the hurricane and looking at the fear, looking at the terror, looking at the anger, looking at the sadness, and looking at the facts, the different decisions that I would have to make, the exams that I would have to do the day after, where I would know if I was condemned to a quick death, or if it was a chance of survival, a lot of things like that. But I had this place of peace from where I could face and embrace everything that was happening to me. And in this place of peace, I was not alone. The presence of the divine was here, and it had it took the form of Jesus. How can I say that? It's difficult to express. And this experience was so important, you can imagine. I had never had such a sense of God's presence and such a sense of support, and this peace was something amazing. And during years, 2 years after that, I couldn't speak about that without crying. And during the day to come, and the weeks to come, and the months to come, every time I was doing the same thing, meditating, using the name of Jesus, this peace was coming back. And it helped me to go through all that I had to face: the decision of amputation, the surgery, going into the surgery room, and just before to have the mask and collapse. Okay, Jesus, you are with me. And with all of these moments with this peace, and waking up without my leg, and learning to walk again with a prosthesis, and facing the pain, and a lot of difficult moments. So this was really a deep spiritual experience. And it's not only that, because when I began to reconsider my past, I went in a therapy group in Oregon. You mentioned it, and it was a kind of it was very lucky, because it's something we had planned years before with my wife, and we thought it would be cancelled because of my amputation. And 1 month after my amputation, I had recovered so well that we decided to take the plane and to go to this therapy group. My wife is a psychotherapist, so that's why we wanted to do this together. And in this therapy group, I began to think of my past, and especially to this memory of healing of my leg, which was the place where the cancer grew up. The same bone that was healed, and that was supposed to be healed when I was a child. Okay, and the pieces of the puzzle went together in this moment, in the light of this authentic spiritual experience. An image that came to my mind is, when you take a block of a big stone, and you take it, and you pull it, and you see what is under the stone, and you begin to see all the little insects and disgusting creatures and worms crawling in panic, because they are not used to the light. And you take away the stone, the light comes, and they begin to panic because of the light. The light is suddenly exposing them. And in my experience, it's this light of the authentic experience I had that allowed me to reconsider my past, and to suddenly discover the reality of this toxicity. And I wasn't, even if I had left evangelical church years ago, decades ago, it was 20 years before, but I wasn't aware of the amount of toxicity that was hidden into my upbringing, into this whole range and system of beliefs. And I don't lie to you, it was for me a kind of strange, twisted epiphany. I had a little notebook and I began to write all the toxic Jesuses. In 3 minutes, the book was here.
Wow.
After that, I just had to unpack it. It took me 1 year to unpack it, but everything was on 2 pages. All the names of the chapters, all the toxic Jesuses, I had seen them. You know, in a way, I had been face to face with them.
Yeah.
Okay, now I see you. Now I see the harm you did in my life. Now I see your toxicity. So you see, that's why I talk about something that is born from a healing experience, and in order to bring some healing and grace, because that was my goal in writing it, because I really think I owe it to my human tribe, you know.
The human tribe.
Yeah, we are in a time where there is so much polarization and fundamentalism and spiritual toxicity, and not only in Christianity. And I speak of toxic Jesuses because it's my upbringing, but some other people could speak of toxic Buddhas or toxic Mohammeds or toxic anything, you know. It's not
exclusive.
It's not exclusive. Any kind of spirituality and religion has its healthy way, its healthy side, and can be used to bypass our humanity, to bypass reality, and to avoid to face the wounds or the frailties that we face, that we have. And when it happens, religion and spirituality become toxic.
Yes. Yeah. And I think your life and the way you see it clearly is a good example of how religion, what job religion is supposed to have, which is, you mentioned your parents had this severe anxiety, and the structure of religion kept everything in check. They were okay as long as they went through the rituals, pleasing this God. And as an evangelical, I was raised evangelical too. We look down on the Catholics and all their rituals, believing that that was magic, when we had our own very clear magic formulas that were supposed to save the day and essentially pleasing God. But you're saying that your life's experience was, we can deal with reality. Religion is supposed to help us cope, keep up this smoke screen, so we don't have to face the fact that life is hard. Life is hard to understand sometimes, it's unfair, all that. But your true revelation in all this mess with the divine was that you were able to face the reality, and you had a peace that, you know, the Bible calls the surpassing of the common sense, that stuck with you, and was so powerful.
And what is so important, you know, it's a way of considering the divine, that it's not disempowering the human. We can so easily use the divine to disempower humans. You know, humans are flawed, they are rotted, they are weak, they need help, and the divine comes and takes charge. And it's not this way that I think a true and healthy connection with the divine happens. Healthy connection with the divine happens, in my experience, when the divine comes to support your strength and humanity, and to, you know, in a way, it's a bit like it's an ally that helps you to face things yourself. And in a way, you become the expression of the divine for yourself.
Yeah. I mean, isn't that what the Genesis 1 to the creation story is about? That God said, now you do. I give you a pass the baton.
Exactly. Yeah.
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 Yeah. So
I think it's very close. Jesus said a lot of things that resonate for me now
yeah.
about the fact that didn't I tell you that you are God's,
Yes.
or I am in you, you are in me.
Mhm.
Don't you know that the kingdom of God is inside of you? You know, there are a lot of things that come together to support this view.
Right. Right. And yes, I agree. I would, like you say, it's hidden in plain sight, but our toxic theology doesn't allow
Yeah.
us to
Yeah.
believe such good news that God is so
Yeah.
much closer
Yeah. Yeah.
and will not go away.
Yeah.
That we can't, that we're not strong enough to make the divine go away, but we certainly have the decision we can make to say, I'm doing this on my own, or as you were saying, the anxiety caused you to call out, and you were saved. You were met in your reality of life.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a very, very beautiful story you have, and it's reality. And it is earth, you know, the tribulation of the earth that Jesus says, you know, that's what you'll face here, but be of good cheer because I have overcome and I meet you in it. I'm adding this part, but he said he never leaves or forsakes us. So
I
you,
like it.
yeah, you've experienced that, and that's what I think your book is about. It's very generously talking about the power of God in terms that are maybe new for people who, in whatever faith tradition they were raised in. But I think you can identify, you can sense inside of yourself that I understand what you're speaking about. Yeah, it resonates with me.
Thank you. Thank you.
So what's next for you? You have written this book. People can find you on Instagram.
Yes. What's next for me? Who knows?
Oh, yes.
Actually, I'm writing a book about intuition.
Intuition, very good.
Yes, because that's something I discovered in this through this experience. I think I still have years to unpack everything that I went through, but I realized how much in my former way of seeing spirituality,
Yeah.
I was always repressing my intuition, and I totally messed up my inner compass.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
You know? Because everything that was coming from my guts, I had to repress it because you know you need to do what the Bible says, you need to do what the pastor says, and usually it's the opposite of what you feel.
Yes. Yeah.
And you learn to be totally you learn to fear and to be totally judgmental of what comes from the human that you are.
Yeah.
Instead of learning to listen to it, to embrace it. And of course, there is a kind of regulation. There is, you need to learn to cope with it and to find your way. And it's not because you suddenly feel something that you need to go this way in the exact moment, but what you feel gives you such precious indication. And you know, I think I learned to recalibrate my inner compass through this experience. And I'm unpacking it about this question of intuition, which is quite very interesting for me.
Yes, yes, yes. And exactly, that was one of the things that came to me too. That's what I keep saying to people, to start listening to the gut, to trust that God, that truth is inside of us as well. Yes, very, very, I'm very encouraged that from so much mess can come so much wisdom and so much healing, and also for other people, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's true.
Thank you so
That
much.
encourages me too.
Yes. Isn't that something? I'll put your Instagram handle on the video too, so people can find
Thank
you.
you. And if you can put a link to the book, it
Yes.
would be great, because, well, it's easy to find, you just have to browse Toxic Jesus on Amazon, and there is only one.
Yeah, there's only one Toxic Jesus book.
Jesus
Yes,
book.
I'll put that all in the video and in the description. So thank you so much for your time, and I wish you all the best.
Something I could say,
Yes.
I've got a blog.
Oh,
My website is my name, Marc-Henri-Sandoz.com.
mhm.
And something it's a new project for me. I open my blog to contributors.
Mm.
So I really hope, and it begins to happen, people send me articles.
Mhm.
And my idea is anybody that feels he or she has something to say about spirituality, about his or her own experience, of course, of maybe toxic spirituality or church abuse, but also what they discovered, the way they see spirituality, the way they grew through difficult moments in order to embrace a larger and freer and healthier view of spirituality. And I really want my blog to become a place where people can have conversations about the topic of spirituality, healthy spirituality versus toxic spirituality, inner work, shadow work, embracing what we are, things like that. So I just take the opportunity to say that if people have things to say, write it, and I'm going to be very happy to open to any kind of contributions.
Yeah, that's a great, wonderful idea. Yeah, I'll take you up on that sometime.
You can. You are welcome. I would love to read something you write. I think you have a lot of good things to say.
Thank you so much.